Let me paint you an ugly picture. Owners of camcorders ripping them apart to get tapes out of them so that they can digitize them. And they just leave them in a mess and then say, here, you can have this. So I've got a couple to see if we can get working. What is this crap? I get sent stuff, you know, like just, here, you can have this. This is how it arrived. This was a gift to me, like as if I need old junk like this. So obviously what's happened here is someone needed to get tapes out of cameras, and rather than take them out the right way, they just kind of rip them apart to get the tapes out. Got 3 of them here, all 8mm, all have been basically forced apart. I don't really think that there's going to be much chance of getting anything to work here. I just want to see what I've got. Very likely end up giving this the hammer treatment, because they're in sad shape. See, if someone brought me a camera to get the tape out of, I would have taken it out without going to the extreme to rip it out. But it'll be interesting to see whether this thing will even power up or what it does. I don't hold my breath that this thing's going to do anything other than maybe emit smoke. So let's get the power supply set up here, and I'm sure this has got a failure of the power supply, because that goes wrong on all these Canon UC1s. They were terrible. I have one. I have a PAL version of a UC1 that the caps actually started leaking on. I don't think I have the back cover for that unit. Yeah, figure out which one's which. Okay, positive is the one on the left. It takes 6 volts. Let's give it 6 volts and see what it does. Negative is this one. Positive is this one here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these units because of the condition they're in. I just want to kind of see what happens. But I think it's probably beyond repair. I don't remember how to turn this thing on. I think that's the power button there. Not to keep you guys in suspense, something will be working before the end of this video. Oops. Well, the microphone's broken now. You can see, if we look at the board here, you can see the damage. See, this is what I'm getting at. Why you don't fix cameras like this. So we can already see where this cap has been leaking, and you can see, you see the board here? See the crap that's been leaking out of here? And some more leakage over here. I mean, this thing's junk. These were junk when they were new. These cameras. Canon, when they brought this to market, they called it the slimmest camera. Well, it was a little narrower than others, but I mean, it was a dreadful camera. And what happens on these is, well, they just, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I can tell you guys right now, this is not one that's going to be going back together. I just want to tear this thing down. Oh, does someone cut the strap off? No. They took the screw out. I want to get this out of the way here. We're going to tear this thing right down and just kind of put this thing out of its misery. Because there are literally no parts in here that really would serve any purpose to even save. The head drum in here is different than any of the other cameras used. It might save the pinch roller. It's about the only thing that might be salvageable out of this is the pinch roller. I don't even think this one unplugs. That's right on the board. It unplugs on this side up here. Right, it unplugged right up here. This is where all the controls, of course, were, right? So quite a common problem on this was this ribbon cable, because it's always sliding back and forth when it opens up and closes. This ribbon cable would break and then you had no control. I'll just undo this. Where's it plug in, or is it over here? I forget. I think it does plug in here. Anyway, to hell with it. In this is the DC to DC converter, and they always fail on these units. I just want to see how bad the leakage is on this, because this was made right at the time where the cameras were actually at their very worst. And Canon was not a big brand. Like, they were not a mainstream company like, say, Sony or other companies were. Canon were very small, and they did not get the good parts. There's a battery in here too. This one can leak.
Wow, a battery backup that is not customer replaceable. Way to go, Canon. You really dropped the ball on this one.
Usually it's caps inside this that go bad. There's a couple of surface mounted electrolytics under here. We'll just remove this cover. This one is my UC1 piece of junk. On mine, the DC to DC converter is shot. I'm going to try this DC to DC converter on mine, because I know that that's what's shot on mine. I'm sure there's more than that wrong with it. But if I can get this one to power up, that'll be a save. Mine's a PAL format camera, and I paid too much for this thing when I bought it. I bought this from a guy that, oh, this is going way back. Way back. This is going back to like the I'm going to say the 1990s, the early 90s, or whenever this camera was around. The fellow that I got this from, he purchased it in the UK by accident. You see, he was traveling, and as the story goes that he told us, he was traveling in Europe and asked someone if he could take some video of him standing looking at some scenery, and he handed his camera to a local. Say, here, can you take my picture? And the guy ran off with his camera with all of his tapes on it, so with his vacation on it. Does that not remind you of a National Lampoon movie? Oh, is this different? I think it's the same. Pretty sure it's the same board. Yeah, it's the same board. It's just got the shield off. You can see what it looks like under the shield. Anyway, he bought another camera. He bought this camera to replace because someone stole his camera. And you know, the guy that stole his camera wouldn't be able to play his tapes because it's NTSC. But anyway, he bought this camera over in Europe and did all his holidays on it and come home with it, and oh, his tapes won't play. So, being in the conversion business, he brought it to me to convert his tapes over for him, which I did, and then he sold me the camera after, because I said, hey, I could use this for when I get the odd PAL tape in. So I bought the camera from him, and see, the couple caps failed in this. I changed them out on this, but this board has now had other problems, and I'm just curious as to whether this one will fire up. There are fuses in here, or there not. There should be fuses on here. Where are we here? Oh yeah, I've taken the battery out of mine, or it didn't have a battery. There's some fuses underneath here, under the battery, which is not necessary. The battery can be clipped out because that's just something that's going to leak. So we'll just cut that battery out. If I can find my snips that I just used like 5 minutes ago. You know, because old batteries and things just don't mix. We'll check those fuses and see if the fuses are popped first. And then I'm going to try this power supply in this camera. I doubt that it works, but another thing I doubt that works is my meter. My fluke meter is starting to act up. I'll have to get a new meter. I got lots of new meters. Okay, let's just check these fuses here. That one's good, that one's good, and that one's good. Yeah, fuses are all good. So fuses are okay. You see these two caps I changed out on this one, and there's another cap up here that I changed. But let's just plug this supply into a camera that wasn't jammed, and it did work up until when the power supply failed. And we'll just see whether this will attempt to power up. All right. Is there any life on this camera? Probably not. Because the power supply is probably shot on this one too. Nothing. We'll pop the shield off this and just see whether those caps have leaked. I'm sure they have. Yikes. I can smell them already. So the ones that were bad on the other one were that one and these two. Those were bad for sure. We'll change those ones out just for. I'll just take the ones off this one because I know that these were changed not that long ago and they've never been used. So we'll just swap them over for something to do. See if I can make this thing fire up. If not, there's other things wrong with it. I mean, the chances are there's more than this wrong with it at this point. Like, even though this other camera was working, my old one was working the last time I turned it on, which was just after fixing the power supply here. It hasn't been used since, and that's because I broke it putting it together. Yeah, you heard correct. I broke it putting it together. What happened was I was putting the shield cover back on, and the shield cover shorted out something, and smoke came off the converter board and burned something out on this board here. So then I abandoned it at that point. I don't know, I may have made a video on that, I forget. It was a long time ago. Ooh, smell that, smell that. That fish oil, what a stink. Anyway, it was one of those things where I should have left it well enough alone. I should have put it together without putting the shield on, and I had it working, and I stuck the shield back on, and to say something, when I soldered the shield down, it shorted something, and that was the end of it. I never got back to working on it again. I just shelved it, and I'm surprised I actually was able to find it as quickly as I did, because I knew exactly where it was, because that's the way it is around here. Even though my place might look like a total disaster to someone on the outside, I know where everything is. Like, I can go and find stuff that I put away years ago, because I remember exactly where everything is. Problem with LED lights is they cause so damn much glare. Alright, let's try this. Let's see whether this board with the new caps that have been put in it will turn on. Not that I really have much use for this camera, because, as I said prior, this is a PAL format camera, so it's this is just more of, will it turn on? And the answer to that is no. So other problems have happened since, which is not unexpected, because this thing is so bloody old. I mean, these see, look at this. I got, this was so I could get to the guides to do alignments, right? Because I'd get tapes that were in that the alignment had shifted, and I needed to be able to adjust it without taking it all apart, because I would get tapes in, European tapes, that the guides had come loose, which was a known issue on these. I mean, these ones here, they're probably loose as it is. Yeah, see, they turn. That was a real known issue on these cameras, is that they were just a piece of junk. But this one doesn't turn on either. It's at 6 volts. Make sure that I've actually got voltage here. Let's just check and see if I... Yeah, it'll draw 10 amps, so it's got power, but nothing. So this power supply is also probably hooped, and that's probably what's wrong with this camera. It's going to be probably other caps that are on here that are bad, but I'm going to spend the time on it. I doubt it. We'll just peek at it quickly, but I'm sure these other caps are also bad. You know, there's a bunch of them here, but this one here, when the shield cover shorted, smoke came off of it. So there's more than just that. Oh, it's a couple of fuses were blown too, I think, on this, because they were bridged over on the old board. These ones were bridged. Anyway, I'm just going to throw this whole piece of crap back together, because this is not going to work. We'll tear the other one down a little more and just see what all's bad in it besides the leaking caps, see how bad it is. and I'll actually tear the whole mechanism apart because it's going to go in the garbage anyway. But some of you guys might be interested in seeing how these things were built and so forth, and what's in them. These little tiny camcorders like this from the 1980s. Call it a teardown video. And I'll dig into all those other ones as well that it's going to go in the garbage, and maybe one of them will be resurrectable. I highly doubt it. The only reason why this one would have been one that I would have wanted to fix ever was because it was a PAL format. But you know, it's been so long since anybody even inquired about converting a PAL 8mm tape to NTSC. These were things that I used to see on a regular basis, like back in the 90s. Although this camera, I don't think I ever made my money back on it for what we got to do a conversion back then. But anyway, that would have been the only reason really to try to make that thing work, is just because it's a PAL format. Okay, let's see what's inside this stupid thing. See how bad this is. It's going to be bad. You've heard it's going to be good, right? Well, this is not going to be good. This is going to be really bad in here. And of all the cameras that I had to work on when I was in the business, this was the one that I detested more than anything else. And it's just because of the way that it was constructed. It was just really, really bad. As you can see, as it comes apart. Get all these stupid ribbon cables. Some of them are actually spliced to each other. Look at that. They actually spliced one header to another, to a different type of material. Little CRT is probably okay in this one. Not that it matters. And then they put all these circuit boards, they put all these soldered these shields over top of them. They're stuck down and they're soldered. Oops. And the service guys were expected to service these things. Absolutely, just the worst as far as serviceability went. It's like, you know, you see what the inside of a Sony camera looks like, which is all laid out nicely, right? And you could get into it, and you could layer things, you could peel things back to work on it. And then you look at one of these ones, and it's just, everything is just kind of thrown together, and it's held together with double-sided tape, and, you know, one screw here and one screw there, and then the board folds out, but there's no way to disconnect things. There's a connector here that can come out to take out the CCD, which is probably also no bloody good. Okay, so I got this board, which is going to be full of our favorite craps. Well, there'll be a few of them on there anyway, but so there's a couple on here. Double-sided board, of course. There's more on the main board. They're all going to be bad. screw under here. You see what I mean? They just hide screws everywhere on them. More connectors. Looks like that's been repaired at some point, probably at the factory. More screws. Yeah, funny thing is this video will probably get thousands of views because I'm not putting it back together. Take it apart and leave it apart. What else is holding this board in place now? Should pop out here. Yeah, it does. And as you can see, this trace here looks like it's been repaired. Probably was damaged at the factory. Look at that. That trace right there has been repaired. Again, that was probably done at the factory. They damaged it when they put it together, and they bridged a piece of wire over it. You can see right there. If I zoom the camera in, see what I mean? There's our good old capstan motor. Now the mechanism comes apart on this. How does this come apart on this one? Don't do this if you ever want to put these back together. Just saying. Remove that, those two screws, and I think there's another two down here that need to come out. This cut washer, or this C-clip over here, E-clip I guess this one is. Remove the E-clip from there, and the other one on this side. Okay, so I got that E-clip out. Now we can lift the mechanism up, and then it slides out like this. That's how the mechanism comes out. Now we can remove the screw that I couldn't get at because the mechanism was in the way. You can see how much work has to go into tearing these things down, and this is why nobody wants to work on these, including me. I would not work on one of these. If it needed mechanical work, I would just say, sorry, this thing is not worth fixing. I don't care how much you want to pay, it's not getting fixed. There's another little cut washer here that has to come off that holds this little gear in place, and then the mechanism can lift apart. And then this will gear this off, and then this will lift off. And we can see the rest of the mechanism. We'll just pop out the little clip over here, a little stand that holds the ribbon cables, which are probably stuck down to this, which they are. That was another problem with this design, is, you know, to take anything out, you got to take this tape off, and you end up ripping the ribbon cable doing so. Designed to be thrown away. When we saw these ones, when I was a Canon service center, and we saw these mechanisms, Avita said, no, these are not going to get repaired. If you have to get in here to change out a broken gear, for example, these are not getting fixed. And look at this. The guides on these are loose, as you can see. You'll see how loose these are. See? Yeah. They're not, they're completely loose. Both of them are so loose you can just turn them. And the reason they came loose is because the little lock screws down the side here, right down here, these little lock screws came loose. They were never tightened down at the factory. We're supposed to tighten those up to stop them from turning. Same with this one down here. The problem is getting at them to tighten them up when the machine is threaded, like when you do the alignment. Well, you can't get into them over here, right? You can't get at these things to adjust them. So this is why they all work their way loose, because they didn't tighten them at the factory super tight to stop the guides from ever turning, because they needed to have enough slip on there so that the alignment could be done, and then they just left them like that at the factory. So they all came loose. Every one of these designs. It was just a terrible design. And yet people bought these cameras because, well, they had the Canon name, and back in the day people had their little 35mm Canon cameras, and they thought, oh, Canon, they make good stuff. They must make good video cameras too. And well, nothing could be further from the truth as far as their video cameras went. Their video cameras were just atrocious. Some of them had been made for them by Sony, but this one was not. This was one that they had built themselves. And it shows with all these stupid flex connectors and taping down these shields, which really weren't necessary. But anyway, this one's now to the point where I'm going to save the pinch roller, and that's about it, because the pinch roller could be used on something else. Maybe the reel tables should be saved too. Not that I think they're going to be useful or anything, but they're not the same as other brands use. But save the reel tables on here, and maybe the back tension band. I don't even think that's going to be useful. The pinch roller, though, I will save, because an 8mm pinch roller is pretty much an 8mm pinch roller, so it will go on any of the cameras. It doesn't matter whether it's a Canon or a Sony. Most of these will fit. So I will keep that pinch roller, because it does look to be in good shape, and the little plastic collar that retains it, because that quite often breaks. So I'm going to put that in a little plastic bag, and I'm going to save that for future use, because that could be useful. And the rest of this thing is just going to scrap, because there's really nothing of any use off of this. Nothing else I'd ever need. But if somebody wants it, speak up quick. I'll send it to you. Just pay the shipping, and you can have a box of parts. Let's see what the next piece of junk is that I got. I might as well just do this all as one video, because I mean, you guys aren't watching anyway, right? You've probably already tuned out. Let's see the next one. I will hang on to the CRT though. We'll see if we can get that thing to display a picture at some point. Next up is an RCA 8mm camcorder. RCA was one of the companies that initially made a VHS-C, if I'm not mistaken, and then they switched to 8mm. Pretty sure, yeah, they made full-size VHS and VHS-C, but they made the switch. I don't know who made this one. Probably Hitachi, because the Hitachi made most of RCA stuff for them. And made in Korea. Maybe it was Samsung. I bet this was Samsung. Let's just see what happens when I power this one up with 6 volts. Does it do anything? There's something neat if one of these actually could be made to work. We'll find out. Looks like there's some corrosion on that terminal. Just trying to figure out how to turn this thing on. There's got to be a switch on here somewhere. Where is the power switch on this one? Battery eject, AV in, AV out. Am I missing something? Is there a circuit board missing? Looks like it's complete. Start stop over here. This is probably the switch right there. BTR. Okay. Switch is on the side. Let's just try powering this thing up with 6 volts. And see whether it lights up. Probably not going to do anything because it's been forced open, but I do see it's got power. It has power. Can you see the display on? It does have power. It says no tape. So it's powering up. It says do. The do sensor is lighting up. What if I put it in camera mode? Is it going to give me a picture? Do. The do sensor is lighting up on this. I'm going to try loading the mechanism down with the just external power to see if it'll go into threading mode. So that part works, so it loads. This one may just have a do sensor problem. Says the battery is low. There you go, give you a bit more voltage. It says L EMG do. I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a message on the screen. Emergency, something emergency, do. And it's got that do indicator flashing. So there should be a little, it's like a resistor that is exposed, like a carbon trace that's exposed. And when it detects that there's moisture, it shuts it down. And while the do sensors can fail, also, oh, and that's unplugged. Loading motor emergency, that would be what that is. Let's just plug the loading motor back in and see what happens. That part works. Well, I got rid of the emergency code. It says tape. Tape is flashing. It's in camera mode. I do not have an image from the camera, but it just says tape. I wonder if where the outputs plug into this thing. Let's see if I can plug it into my TV and get a picture. Okay, so in camera mode, I get sound, I get feedback. If I turn up the volume, you'll hear that the camera microphone is working, but the iris looks to be shut on the camera. Whenever I give it a smack with something, whether it will open. It might just be a stuck iris. Let's just give it a whack. I want to see if this thing will play. If this thing will play a tape, then I can turn around and sell this thing for, like, you know, $30 to somebody who's looking for a machine to play tapes on. So flashing tape, let's put it into playback mode. I'm just going to try loading a tape on this. See whether it'll load a tape. If it'll play back, then I'll maybe look at the lens and see whether the lens is just stuck. I don't have an adapter for this, so it's like, even if I get it to play, who's going to want it? Incidentally, the reason why it was showing do is here's the do sensor right here, and it is attached to the same board as the motor, and this was unplugged. That's probably why this thing wouldn't eject the tape or wouldn't load, was because it got bumped or dropped or something and that connector came loose. Or someone took it apart to get the tape out and they unplugged that and then just put some power across the motor to force it and never bothered to plug it back in. Anyway, it seems to be loading a tape now. I just got to figure out how to make this thing play. So the buttons over here are the same buttons that are used for, like, fade, backlight, edit, DSE edit. They actually double as the play, stop, fast forward, pause, and rewind buttons over here. So if I press this button, so not a total lost cause. We might end up with one. Actually, well, we do have one working camcorder. We have one working camcorder so far. I got another one, but maybe it'll have its own video. This is playing. This is excellent. So I now have a camera that I can turn around and sell cheap for someone who's looking for a machine to play back tapes. Now, how do we get rid of that display? will that display go off if I push the OSD button, which it does. Perfect, because nobody wants to make copies of their taped archive stuff with that on the screen. So I just basically need to find an adapter for this before I can sell it to someone for a camera for playback. But that's a good one. So we know that that part works. Let's just eject the tape. So the problem we have on this camera right now is there's no video from the camera. And I think that's probably a stuck iris. So let's just see whether we can fix the stuck iris and make this a fully functional camera. Remove another screw here, and this whole chassis should lift right out. We'll take this piece off now, the microphone. And there's another screw down here. Actually, the camera section should lift off too. The lens does not appear to be moving either, so it might be a power issue for the camera section itself. It might be a fuse that's popped, because the zoom doesn't move when I zoom the lens. I don't see the glass moving inside, so that would certainly explain why the iris is closed. If there's no power getting to the lens, it's not going to operate it. But why there's no power is the question. It could be something as simple as that it's unplugged, or it could be a popped fuse, or any number of things. So first things first, we'll just investigate. I don't want to spend too much time on this thing because it's mine, and really, if I can make the thing work and just play back tapes, that's more what people want. If I can get an old camera, you know, dirt cheap, nobody wants to spend any money for these things. So if I can fix something up and make it work as a player, and, you know, make 50 bucks on it or something, then I doubt even I'd get that for it. But we try to get 50 bucks for things. Usually we don't. Usually it's a lot less than that, because everybody wants stuff for nothing. Okay, that should just unplug. This thing should just pop out. That. Unplug the viewfinder. Okay, let's see what's on this board here. One thing you won't see many of is you won't see many surface-mounted electrolytic caps in this one. There's a couple over here in the power supply, and that's about it. That's probably why this thing still works after all these years, is that it's not loaded with surface-mounted electrolytic caps. They're all solid tantalum type caps on here, and ceramic caps. Just unplugs. And there's a couple of fuses right here. Let's just see if the fuses are popped. Because a popped fuse will certainly cause me problems. Let's see if my little fluke meter will still work. I'm having trouble with my fluke meter. Okay, this fuse is good, and this fuse is good. So the fuses are okay. I do see a couple surface mounted caps down here, but only a few. I'll unplug the camera section. It's just these two screws that hold the camera section on. I think that's it. Unplugs. And there's this cable here that plugs in. Okay, so that's the camera section. Should separate so I can get the lens and take this plastic cover off so I can get at the lens. I just want to take a look at the iris and see if it's sticking, because it seems like a stuck iris, but again, if the lens isn't getting power for some reason, nothing's going to work, and the zoom didn't appear to work on it either. So We just need to get into here and see if it's just something that's sticking. What happens on a lot of these lenses is the, especially if they're stored in the heat, is that the grease that they use to lubricate it, the oil that they use in the lens to lubricate it, migrates down and gets onto into the lens elements and causes them to stick. So the way to fix them is you got to take the lens apart so you can get at the motors and so forth. It's got this sticky rubber insulation on here which is deteriorating. That might be part of the problem. Okay, now that's the focus. Oh, that's the zoom, either the zoom or focus, and there's another motor over here which is the other. One's the zoom and one's the focus. And then there'll be an iris, and I think this is the iris right there. Not an easy design to work on, that's for sure. Oh, okay, that connector doesn't look like it's seated all the way. This is where the lens plugs in. Could this be the problem? You see, that connector doesn't look like it's seated straight, does it? That looks like that's sticking out at an angle. Maybe it was all the way in. Anyway, got to pull it out of the way to remove a couple sensors. So I'm removing the optical sensors. This is what tells the camera when the lens is at one extreme or the other for focus and zoom. Now that those are removed, I can now get to the iris motor and so forth. It's a plug in here. Okay, that's got that. Now, what's next? If we take out these two screws, this whole CCD assembly should lift off the back of the lens. Okay, that's got the CCD assembly off. If you look at that, there it is, complete with the infrared cut filter on the front there. Let's put that out of the way. Now I can get into the lens itself, down into the meat and potatoes, as they say, and open up the lens and inspect that iris motor, that iris. I suspect was sticking, but then, hey, what do I know? I've never taken one of these ones apart, by the way. This is the first for me to remove a lens off of one of these cameras. Taken a few Sonys apart, but not done one of these ones, so don't know what I'm up against here. I'm actually going to throw the lens back together because I really don't want to go down that road of tearing this thing down any more than I have. Put the two screws down that hold the optical sensors in place for the lens. And plug this back in. This is the iris motor that plugs into this one. Like that. Okay, now I can put the CCD assembly back on. And that goes on like this. couple more of those surface mounted caps in here. And plug the lens back in. And yeah, I am intentionally not putting on the rubber around it. That was basically to goes on this way. That was to keep the noise down, right from the lens itself operating, so that the microphone didn't pick it up. Big deal. You really think anybody's ever going to record on tape? Come on. I would say give your head a shake, but somebody will correct me and tell me that they're still recording on tape. But give your head a shake. Nobody records on tape. At least they shouldn't be. If you're recording on tape, you shouldn't be. You should be recording on something that's a little more reliable than tape. Now someone's probably going to complain about how they'll be lecturing me on how bad memory cards are and how memory cards you can lose everything. And yes, I'm fully aware of that. I've had customers that have trusted their stuff to USB and only to find that they've lost it. Where that goes together here. There's a couple more screws here. Only to find out that they've lost it because they didn't copy it before they lost it. Yes, I'm fully aware that solid state memory is not the most reliable thing in the world, and you can lose your content when it's on solid state memory. Absolutely. The problem with solid state memory is that get me going down that road now. Solid state memory. The problem with solid state memory is that you're trusting your recordings to be stored in essentially capacitors. You're storing a charge in a capacitor. It's built into the chip. It's in silicon, but it's still what amounts to a capacitor. Basically how flash memory works is a charge is stored in the capacitor. Of the flash memory in a cell, memory cell, which is nothing more than a capacitor. And you read that charge back when you play it back, when you're reading it. And the same goes for SSDs. They work exactly the same way. It's a charge is placed in silicon in what's called a floating gate, which is isolated from the rest of it. So when the charge is injected, it's what they call it, quantum tunneling, I believe, is the term that was used to describe how it works. But through quantum tunneling, you are tunneling electrons through an insulator into a storage medium, which is essentially a capacitor. And then to read it back, the gate of the field effect transistor is able to detect whether that charge that was stored is a 1 or a 0, or in the case of the most recent memory, the high capacity memory, is it's not just a 1 or a 0. You're not just checking if there's a charge there or not. The earliest form of flash memory was just two states. You had a high or a low. It was pretty easy to detect. It was either there was a charge there or there wasn't. The modern stuff now, it's multiple levels of charge. So to simplify it, if you can store 5 states of charge or 4 states of charge, you could have 1 volt, 2 volts, 3 volts, 4 volts, for example. And you're reading back how many volts you put into that charge, into that gate, or into that cell that's read by the gate. And the problem is if the voltage starts to dissipate and you start to lose the charge, it gets to be a point where, is it a 3 or is it a 4, right? Or is it a 2 or is it a 3? And at that point, the memory is unreadable. That's what happens with flash memory. What can and what does happen with flash memory is that you can lose everything, and That's why I tell every customer, like every customer, when I'm archiving their stuff onto flash media, I tell them, when you get home, the first thing you're going to do when you walk in the door is you're going to take that memory stick and you're going to pop it in your computer and you're going to make a copy of it. And I'll keep your footage, you know, for 7 days, type of thing. I'll keep a copy of it for 7 days. It gives you a chance to verify that you're able to copy it and you're able to read everything. And after 7 days, I'm going to delete your copy because I don't need to keep a copy of your footage. Give people time to get their stuff, to get their ducks in a row, so to speak. And but I've had people call me up, you know, like years down the road, not months, years down the road, and tell me that they can't read their memory, they can't read their flash memory that I stored their content on, and wondering if I've still got a copy of it. And the answer is no, I don't. But at that point it's like, well, you were told to back it up. As I continue to put this thing back together and ramble on about people losing their recordings on solid state memory, hey, at least you don't have to worry about it getting erased from just deteriorating tape or getting chewed up or mold. We won't even go down that road. Mold on tapes. Yum. So I got all the screws back in. We'll just plug the microphone back into here, and we'll plug it in and see whether I get a picture off the camera. I doubt that I will, but you never know, right? So I still do not have a picture from the camera section itself, and the zoom doesn't appear to move either. So I just want to see whether I still get playback, and if I do, then I'm going to just leave this thing as a playback machine here. And I do have play. It's playing fine. If I put it into camera mode, what happens? On-screen display works. The lens does not appear to zoom. When I try to zoom it, it's not moving. So it's a problem in the camera section. Anyway, that's something I'm not really too worried about. Yeah, looking at the camera lens, it's not. It's in full zoomed out or full zoomed in position. It's not moving. As you can see, if we look down into the lens, there's no movement. So the lens itself is completely dead. It could be the camera section causing that too, right? Because it's fed from the camera section. Fuses are not blown. It plays. It doesn't record, but that's fine. So let me just throw the side cover on this thing, see if I can find some screws. All right, I do believe I have this unit back together. I'll give it one final test to make sure it plays back tapes. Watch it eat my tape now that I've got it all back together. Power it up. There we go. Okay, that one's back together. I'm gonna end this now. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.